Today we have with us Ian Raygor. Please say hi to the people.
Hi, Pasha. Thank you for having me on today. Nice to meet everybody.
Appreciate you coming. Appreciate you coming. So there's this thing that you got, right? That you gave me that you defined for me. Because on the channel we've been speaking about, well, we're kind of built on it, but creating sustainable communities and what that means from an economic standpoint, emotional intelligence, mental health awareness, all kinds of stuff. And
Yes.
you presented your version of a term to me, which I actually like, and that term was traditional wealth. Can you elaborate for the people on traditional wealth as defined
Well,
by you?
sure. So today, people seem to think that money is wealth. And a long time ago, well, not even a long time ago, 50 years ago or more, it was about what you produced, what you had. So people had animals, they had uh, durable goods, they had all sorts of things, right? It wasn't just reduced to a monetary value. And it goes beyond even that. It goes back to relationships. It goes to your intelligence, your health. All these things fall into it. So instead of looking at just a single dimension, money or cash in this case that we have in currency today, you have to look at the whole person, right? Am I mentally sound? Am I physically sound? Am I, where am I in the world and with my family and with the people that I know?
Mhm. So that's interesting because what we know is that the what we call money um, hasn't been in circulation since the 30s, and we now have this fiat currency, right?
Right.
So which gives a lot of control to the quality of life, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to entities outside of oneself. If you're
That's
looking at
right.
we the people and their
Hmm.
households and their communities, speak on that for us for a moment, like that control aspect and how that may, on a high level overview, play into food and being able to support each other and the richness of experiences, etc.
Sure, absolutely. Well, you know better than I actually. Talking to you the other day was amazing because you have a lot more information even than I do. I've been learning about it slowly and surely, but um, the government has becoming big. Our country is becoming more we the government than we the people, right? And like you said, since 1933, they took us off the gold. Well, they stole our gold basically, and, right? And then it was
Yep.
supposed to be a temporary thing, and it ended up being a permanent thing. Just like in 1971, we were supposed to be taken off the gold standard temporarily. It was a permanent thing. A lot of people, I don't think, understand that. But a lot of people get angry with me because I say, we actually live more in a fascist society than we do a free society. And what is fascism? People use that word all the time, and I think they use it improperly. But
Hmm.
fascism was out of Italy in World War II, and it had to do with the government and the banks and the corporations colluding and controlling the means and ways of production. That's what fascism is. And if you look at what a U.S. has been over the years, that's where we've slowly been moving towards. Right? You had the what they called the captains of industry in the late 1800s and early 1900s really start to capture industry, right? And then they concluded, of course, with Wilson, I believe it was, right? And they brought in the Federal Reserve in 1911, 1913. And since then, it's just been downhill. And as they take more and more control over the markets, over the way to produce things, the way the cash, the money, right? They take control of that. It leaves us at their whim, at their beck and call, and it really is not healthy for everybody, for anybody, right? And so that's I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where how I see it.
I absolutely think that answers the question, and I appreciate that. Um, it's kind of interesting, as you mentioned, in support of what you were saying, that each industry at the top of it, there's a government controlled agency or corporation that kind of acts as the assumed perceived authority figure over the industry, creating regulations, etc., stuff like that, which definitely a lot of people fall in line with and they go along with the program, right? So let's look at the food section because one of the key elements that you brought up under traditional wealth was the ability basically to have your own food, right? Supply.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So if we go back to the Great Depression and agricultural policies to show that like you mentioned, the government has a history of this, what people call the government. And it's a great opportunity to speak about these things because what's the quote? Those that don't know their history are doomed to repeat it, right?
Yes, yes.
So back in the 1929 or 41 or so, give or take, the U.S. Government implemented what they call agricultural policies.
Hmm.
From my notes here,
Hmm.
and it was aimed to stabilize farm incomes and prices.
That's
The
what they
cap
say. Yes.
So some would argue that certain interventions, such as the Agricultural Adjustment Act of 1933, also led to unintended consequences, quote unquote unintended, including the destruction of crops and livestock to artificially inflate prices.
Hmm.
And when you hear that, I mean, we just saw that recently. Potato farmers, cows. Speak
Oh
on
yeah.
that. Speak on that over that period of almost going on 100 years now to
Well,
how it hasn't changed.
no, well, it goes back to the same thing. It goes back to the government and the corporations controlling the means and ways of production. It's always that. They talk about the police, or they talk about this, or they talk about the other, and they talk about racism. And yes, is there racism out there? Absolutely, there are people who are racist. But the main thing is about power and control. It has really that the racism is a secondary thing. I think personally, from what I've seen, and they're just slowly moving us away. And that goes back to that idea of the frog in boiling water, right? Starts in tepid water, and they just raise that temperature, and so people are just more and more accustomed to how things are. Oh, this is the way it's always been. No, it's not the way it's always been. And not only that, people aren't aware of the stuff that's going on in the background. They're not aware of all the laws. They're not aware of everything that's happening, and that's another thing that's separated. In the 1960s, they really shut down teaching civics in schools, and they wanted that because the people were rebelling against what they were doing. They talk about these wars in Korea or Vietnam. They weren't wars. They weren't
Mhm.
cleared by Congress. Their police actions is what they were, and we weren't really wanted in many of those things. And so, not that we shouldn't have necessarily engaged, but maybe the way that we did. I wasn't there. I don't know. I didn't see it, but it really goes back to that. It really goes to you keep people under control by controlling their information, and that's definitely what's been done to us for a long time.
I like your nodal points reference there from racism to information because what people have heard me say often is that the new racism, which may shock a lot of people who think they're United States citizens in general, the new racism is critical thinkers. It's your conscious level. It's your um, comprehension ability. Because if you're a critical thinker, that's going to make you harder to control. And if you look at what racism was as we think it was described to us, even that was a measure of knowledge control. It was like we want you to not know that you are this. We want you to believe that you're here, and we're going to forcefully, in the best of our ability, try to maintain you thinking down here over history. So that's dependency concern. You could basically say is what helped forge the welfare system in a different avenue because although it wasn't the same approach and attack and horrific measures to achieve it, when they implemented the US welfare system in the 60s, like you mentioned, that time period, the unintentional created consequences of that was a cycle of dependency, some argue, rather than actually fostering self-sufficiency.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which, when some people look at the whole civil rights movement, it was not the freedom or the freeing of one group of people or the liberating of one group of people. It was actually the enslavement of everybody who believed they are of the United States.
Right.
So it was really a great manipulation and deception that most people missed, and then they don't realize how they are actually what they might have actually in some cases hated against or was so prejudiced against back then. They don't realize that they actually are that today because they don't know what the words mean.
Right.
but but speak about maybe how that welfare system allowed them to create that dependency factor, which then creates cycles of dependency instead of the community itself. Because like you said, regulations, they come in, and once you get onto it, it's like a drug. Now you can't make over this because then you'll come off of it. But if you come off of it, you're going to be making just enough to come off of it, but not enough to really survive anyway. So it's better for you to stay back on. So they created all these factors to create the dependency. Isn't that the same thing that's going on today? And so how does that work into today's life, even for those people that believe they're outside of public assistance or, that type of level, that world, where it's really what's going on in a day-to-day life, much more common than just welfare and financial, state funding and stuff like that.
Well, it goes all the way back again to the Federal Reserve Act, and before that even. But that was just another way to impoverish the people, to control the people. Right? We're going to tax you and you're not supposed to have direct taxes on our earned income. Still not supposed to do that. And it was spread from DC. Anyway, that's a whole another rabbit hole that people can go down. But it goes back to power control. And so, what are the ways that we can double speak and get people to go where we want them to go, right? And the politicians have been doing that for years. Thomas Sowell, I would say, says any of it better than I do as far as the social, because he used to be a socialist actually, right? And then he started reading and understanding what it was, and understanding the problem that's facing these people and Black people in particular. I mean, they talk about Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood, right? They think of them as are great people. Margaret Sanger was a huge racist, and her purpose was to exterminate Black people or control them at very least. And so there are so many factors, like you alluded to, right? We have the FBI, the IRS, we have the tobacco firearms, we have all these, the ATF, all these different. They're not even elected. There are ad hoc agencies of the government, right, that have been brought in, and they shouldn't have any say whatsoever, but they do, and they'll kill you for it, which is unfortunate. But there are so many factors, and the people doesn't. It goes back to information. Actually, people don't understand. They don't know what's out there, and you have to be a critical thinker. And I prefer the term accurate thinker, right? You can't be an accurate thinker unless you have good information, right? Garbage in, garbage out. And so we have to go and we have to dig. And so many people of this day are so lazy, right? Everything's they have a computer at their fingertips, and they can go and research. And yes, it takes time to research, but you really have to go and look at what's been happening over the years for the last 200 years and figure out what's going on. And you have to make that effort. And then not only figure that out, a lot of people, there are some people I talk to who know what's going on, but they don't do anything effectively towards a better end. And so not only do we have to have that knowledge, we have to act on that knowledge and do something about it. So you've opened up a bag of worms there too, because there's so much that people have to realize, and they just don't, and it's just sad. And they have it right there at their fingertips, and they won't go look for it.
So now that we've got like an icebreaker on the table, in your opinion, how aligned is the current government policies with the values of traditional wealth as defined by community and or industry?
Oh, they're absolutely contrary to it, right? You have, not only do you have no price discovery in the market, you have no product discovery. You have all these. One of the main jobs of government are the antitrust acts, right? They're supposed to protect against monopolies and all these things, and instead of helping against it, they're actually helping with it. Mm-hmm. So they're exactly opposed to it, because again, it's not about the people, it's about control, it's about power, it's about being able to do what they want to do. They want to make sure that they're of the Malthusian mindset, right? There are limited supplies, so we can't let everybody have this, and you have to get rid of certain people, or you have to control certain people so they don't consume so much, or whatever that may be. The Georgia Stones, just recently, was it last year or the year before? People were starting to get known about them and seeing them. And, I was talking to somebody about it. It's like, well, that's just a conspiracy theory. I was like, no, they're actual stones in Georgia, here in the United States. So you can actually go look at what they're saying. Right. Mm-hmm. And then mysteriously they get destroyed. Right. One of them got destroyed. So they took out the whole thing. So as these things come up, as people become aware of these things, they get rid of them. So people can't see what's actually happening. So no, they're actually aligned against everybody for wealth, for true wealth. Right.
So
go ahead.
With that on the table, do you see the measures as effective in encouraging sustainable practices? I know you said that the government is contrary, right, with yes. their position.
Yes.
Or are they just potential drawbacks? Do you think it's by design, or does it just happen to be a haphazardly
It
potentially a drawback to the good thing that they were
No,
trying to do?
I think it's absolutely designed. If you look at our information, there have been many videos that talk about how the media, right? They just parrot each other, and there are just thousands of people saying exactly the same thing. You can't coordinate that accidentally. That doesn't happen accidentally. You can't have the destruction of crops of animals in the last 2 or 3 years accidentally. We've had more
Mhm.
destruction of crops and animals and things in the last 3 years than many years combined before that, right? It'd be a few things here and there, but you hear about them almost monthly, that this was destroyed, that was destroyed, the others were destroyed. It's just and I truly believe that the uh, coronavirus was a part of that, right? If you looked at the end of 18 and 19, you saw a huge hit on the markets, October, November, December, I believe,
Mhm.
of both of 18 and 19. And oh, what happens in 20? Oh, we have this virus that comes out of nowhere. And, oh, well, we have to act. We have to work in the best interest of the people. But if you look at all the cash that they printed, very little of it went to the people. Most of it went overseas and to other places, right? To their palace, to their harbors of wealth that they have for themselves, or at least cash they have for themselves. So no, I don't think it's accidental. And the only way we're going to counter that is if people start to come together and start to cooperate and do the things that we need to do locally, right? People are always trying to do things remotely, which okay, fine, but if you're not able to, this goes back to the traditional wealth idea, right? What do we need? We need food, we need clothing, we need shelter, we need education, we need energy. These are the things we need locally. Well, where are we getting those things? We're not producing them ourselves. We either have a huge corporation doing it, or we're getting it from overseas, from China or wherever. We're not producing locally. Ever since GATT and NAFTA in the 1980s, production has been destroyed here in the United States.
Yeah, yeah. That was a big, what they call it, red flag, so to speak, because if you want to control the nation or what appears to be the nation, then if you get rid of its ability to produce its own stuff, send it overseas, now you see why the whole nation's in a position where it's like we have to rebuild everything because nothing's here anymore. So that actually ties into some things like regulations and stuff like that, incentives that the government puts out. Like, so in the in the pursuit of quote unquote sustainability, there has been incidents is where the government's policies like carbon tax and stuff, have they want us to think that it's positively influencing an industry or economic practice, but when you dive into it, it's really making it harder for the people who need it the most to industrialize
That's
to
right.
now industrialize because
That's right.
of the caps already met. China's producing this much, US producing this much. There's no room for you to grow, little guy over there. So you're gonna have to stay in third world type environments, or your community can't build that particular, the cheapest thing is probably gonna be what, coal, and then work your way up to nuclear if you wanted to go that route. So you may not be able to put a coal plant up in your community that maybe it's privately owned by you or the community to support the community
Hmm.
because they're gonna knock you down for some greenhouse gas regulations and stuff. So we see that there may be a financial incentives for green investments supporting industries that contribute to the environment's sustainability, but these incentives may not be fairly distributed or accessible,
Right.
and thus could create economic despair between industries, communities, and wherever they want, really, right? So
Yep.
I'm glad that you brought it up, because speak about how when you say we need to do something, what's your opinion on bring that into the picture of why we need to know this stuff, the value of knowing it, so we can know why we need to do it, why there needs to be the separation, because otherwise this, like you're saying.
Well, well, you said it yourself earlier, right? It goes back to the people being able to produce what they need. If they're not able to produce what they need, especially locally, you're going to run into problems. And a lot of the stuff you were talking about too, as far as energy and the carbon taxes and all this stuff, right? They're shutting down coal plants because they say they're detrimental. They produce too much carbon, but that's not true. If you look at the new burning coal, much less.
Mhm.
You've heard of rocket stoves, or people have seen rocket stoves, right? They burn off nothing but vapor. They burn out that coal, so you're not creating creosote in the sense, in the term of or in the sense of wood. I forget what the off put is of coal, but it
Mhm.
burns it so purely that all you're giving off is vapor. So there's no CO2. All right, it's a fallacy. It's garbage. And there are other ways too, that if you look at the way houses are built, if you look at the old 2x4s, they're actually 2 inches by 4 inches. Now they're like half of that. They're small. And so you look at the way houses have been built over the last 50 years, 100 years, completely different than the older houses. And now you have different technologies that are coming back finally, as in hemp. I love hemp because hemp can do whatever oil can do and do it better. And so you can make a house out of hemp and it'll be very, very energy efficient, right?
Mhm.
And these are the things that people just don't know, but they have these things in place already and they don't want them disturbed. We have our building industry, we have our food industry, we have all these things. We're controlling them. We don't want you in on it. And we're going to do everything we can to squeeze you out of it and not be able to let you produce. Um, but the other part of that is too is people are very comfortable about not doing anything. They're used to now people producing for them, doing things for them, not doing it for themselves. And so we become very lazy, very soft, myself included. Right? I've not been. I've worked hard labor when I was younger, working on the North Slope, working labor jobs. But since then, I haven't. I've done mostly desk jobs. So I'm one of those soft people. I don't want to be one of those soft people. But also the other thing about that is that even the farming methods now today, you have different ways of growing things that are much easier. You have aquaponics, hydroponics, you have permaculture, you have all this knowledge that's now available to us, that we can make it. It's much easier to produce than it was back in the past, right? You're not trenching out or land, right? You're not doing all the back-breaking work. You don't need horses. You don't need um, whatever it is, cows to pull bulls to pull your stuff. So there are much easier ways to produce now, and it's just people just aren't aware of it, or they're not interested in looking into it. I've talked to several construction people. I'm like, oh, do you do hemp? Like, never heard of it, right? You should be in construction. You should know that there's hemp construction, and they don't
Mhm.
know about it, and they have no interest in knowing about it, which is amazing to me. Why would you not want to be able to expand your construction capabilities, right? It's an odd combination of ignorance and indifference and laziness. It's an odd thing out there in the world.
I you're right, and the effect is, like you said, the value added is that technology wise, it's a different time frame. So you bring up a great point of, yeah, you don't need to have plows and tractors and 10 million acres of land. You know, I tend to have that conversation often, especially with the people nowadays in communities. They're like, oh, we need to grow our own food. Okay, well, one, we don't have the original seeds, but let's go to growing your own food part, right? So we're going to grow our own food. You don't really need it to be outside. You can do vertical farm operations in a building inside a community. We did a whole initiative on this on my Facebook page some years ago. And you can use vertical space and produce the same quantity as tons of footprint horizontally from a vertical location, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're producing your own energy, now you're self-sufficient. Okay. So you bring up a great point in a construction thing with hemp, because it makes me want to ask the question, in what ways does the community actively engage with government policies related to sustainability, especially when it comes to traditional wealth topics? Because the reason why they're not knowing about it is because of regulatory measures. See,
Right.
we talked about incentives. So the government may implement regulations. We know what we call the government may implement regulations that promote, quote, what they define as sustainable
Mm-hmm.
practices,
Mm-hmm.
protecting the environment and public health. And it's kind of like, yeah, why have the carbon tax and put gas at $5 to slow people down from burning through it, when you've already shelved multiple projects where there was an engine that could run on water and produce none of that?
That's right.
So overly restrictive regulations, kind of impact certain industries or communities, only making it difficult for them.
That's right.
So, how, the hemp is a bigger factor than just construction, in which you say it's because clothing and all kinds of stuff, right? It's
Paper. Yep.
paper.
Oils. Yep. Yep.
So
Fuel.
let's go back to that question then. In what ways does the community actively engage with government policies related to sustainability? And now that you've defined it as a broader sense of a collective traditional wealth, I mean, why aren't we doing more to sway those policies as a public, you think?
it goes back to information, right? People just don't know, or they don't care to know. it's it's the big thing, and so this really has to be a grassroots roots movement. We're not supposed to engage the government. We're not supposed to convince the government. The government there is to protect our rights. That was the original purpose of the documents of our founding fathers. It was not for the government to control us and tell us what to do, and we're not negotiating with the government. Although that's what we're having to do now. We're in that position because they have the power, they have the control, they control the means and ways. It just goes back to that same argument. And so, quite frankly, people just need to educate themselves. And what you're doing is awesome, right? You have better information than I do, and you're getting it out to people. But people are so accustomed now, right? The government is gone, and their cronies have gone out, and they say, well, these are just tinfoil hat people. These are just conspiracy theorists. These are just that, this, that, and the other. And so, instead of looking at the argument, right, all they have is the ad hominems. All they have is the non sequiturs. And that's what, and many people I have a conversation with, that's exactly where they go. They go into these uh, illogical arguments instead of looking at the problem and dealing with the problem that we have in front of us. And because I think lots of people know that there's an issue, right? But they don't
Mhm.
know why that issue is the way it is, right? They don't understand. They don't understand inflation. They don't understand how much that robs them of their wealth, of their time. They don't understand the policies that you're talking about, right? The people look back at Abraham Lincoln and they think he's one of the greatest presidents in the world. I'm like, his motivation was not about slavery. His motivation was about keeping the United States together as one. Okay, fine, that's great. But the way he went about it, he's one of the ones that actually um, caused the big issue with the what do you call them? They're doing it all the time now. The presidential ad ad hocs that he says. I can't remember the term right now. Um, anyway, he just says this is the law now. This is what we're going to do. Executive orders. I
Okay.
left behind, right? Executive orders. Well, that's what Abraham Lincoln did, and then the people just took after that and started doing it more and more. And if you look at the executive orders from all the last presidents, the last 20, 30, 40 years, it's been absolutely insane. And so those are supposed to be for emergency orders, right? They're an emergency. Not everything is an emergency, but they treat everything like an emergency. So they have the people in this heightened state of panic and fear and doubt and uncertainty. And that's what they want them because then they're ineffective, right? And so there's no really reasoning with the government right at this point because the vast majority of them don't care about us. They care about themselves only. Are there a few good people out there? Yes, absolutely. But they're so small in number that they're not really going to be effective. And it's really going to take the people coming together and doing it, regardless of what the government says. This is what we're doing here. The biggest thing that the people could do is pull all these corrupt people out of government, pull them out of DC, bring them back to the states, say, we're going to deal with our problems here in the states first. You don't need to go to DC and cause more problems. They should probably reverse 99% of the laws out there because most of them are either redundant in the Constitution or they're contrary to the Constitution. Right? There are very few laws out there that are actually beneficial to the people. And so it's the whole mindset that has to change. And until that mindset occurs, we're going to continue to go down the same road we've been down for the last 150 years.
Very, very. There's a lot to unpack there, and thank you for sharing. I want to start with the statement that the government's here to protect our rights, and I would say that's false. They're hoping that we don't know our rights in most cases because it gives them more power, right?
Well,
So
that's what they're supposed to be doing. I'm not saying that's what they are doing, but that was the original intention of, if you look at the Constitution, right? They're there for our rights. They're there to protect our rights. They're there to protect against monopolies, right? That was the intention of many of, not all of them. If you read the Federalist Papers, you can actually see the conversation between these people of those who want big government and those who want small government, right? And obviously, the big government won out, but the original intention was to get the government as much out of it as possible. But you're right. No, that's not what they've been doing for a very long time. You're correct there.
so when we really go back to for entertainment purposes to define what the actual government corporation is today as an entity, we have to know what the British East India Company was, chartered in the 1600s or 1601, um, because it actually was a corporation designed to facilitate trade, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why a lot of things with them are commerce based. Everything,
Yes.
even crime is commercial. Most people don't look at it that way.
Yeah.
So what happens is if you're sailing around the world back then and go, hey, we're coming here all the time. What products do you offer? Okay, you got spice. Okay, give us the spice, sign this document, tell us what you got. We can either pay you now or we'll come back on consignment, blah, 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 right? When you do that trip often enough, you're like, hey, you know what? Why don't you just let us build a building over there? Or let's get that little, marble building over there on the left and let us have that. And we'll set up our operation out of there. And next thing you know, it grows and expands. And that's the Capitol building. That's the government
Mhm.
building, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that comes into why there hasn't been any new laws actually since the 30s. Everything is acts, statutes and codes, right, for entertainment purposes. But I'm bringing that up to say, when you're looking at it as a corporation, everything starts to make more sense.
Yes.
That's why they're
Yes.
issuing bills and not laws, because they're
Yeah.
billing we the people. They're here to provide services for we the people. And if people knew that the government was basically a big Walmart, they could then place it in their mind to say, wait a minute, we're not subjects of Walmart, we're customers. It
Mhm.
kind of gives us a different light into how the conversation should go as to what we want as the customer, because they're here to provide services, and that's why they're introducing bills, right? And that
Right.
brings me to say, I appreciate your comment earlier about what I'm doing, but it's what we are doing. Me, you're here with me doing this work, and also the people that are viewing, when they view this, are part of that community that's growing to reach critical mass. So that brings me to this point, being as though it's really a business and it's really about bills and exchange of goods. Now we have to look into the investment factor and incentives there, because financial incentives, for whether it's a green investment or a farm investment or whatever, or a crippling situation, right, purposely done, we've experienced that they have support there through financial investments, through lending programs, through what you got to be or do to get qualified for certain monetary incentives, whether it's tax deductions. It's not tax advice or anything like that, of course,
Right.
or just being able to get a loan. So then there's the question of how effective we find these measures at promoting both the economic stability, sustainability, or lack thereof, right? And I put that on the table for you to answer from a perspective of what you do, dealing with cash and asset protection, right? RE Insight LLC. Take that question and intertwine it and let people know who you are, what the RE stands for, which I thought was amazing, and your perspective in the answer to that question. Because we gotta get the cash together or the investment potential so we can build what we need as a community to begin with. So talk about that for us.
Well, there's touched on some other things I guess I want to touch on going back. And so, like you were talking about the East India Trade Company, right? It was about spreading the power of England, right? Of the empire that they had. That was part of it. The other part of it is, like you said, they formed the U.S. corporation in the early 1900s, I believe. I can't remember exactly the date. You probably know better than I do. And people aren't aware of that, right? It was only supposed to. They were only supposed to, just like the Federal Reserve Act was only supposed to be for DC, right? Only for DC, not outside of it. And so what they've done is they created this corporation that's in conflict with the Constitution. And that's why you'll see some people actually win the fights, because they're actually referring to the Constitution, not to the laws that have been set by the corporation. And people don't understand that difference either. That's a huge thing that people need to understand. Um, so what I started out with is funny, because I've changed the definition of my company. So I started out with real estate insight, because I was really looking at real estate and doing different things there. But that was about the time that everything started to go crazy with everything, right? And so I changed that to Riziki Eleftheria, which is Greek for radical freedom. And not radical in the sense of crazy or far out there in left field. Radical comes from the word radix in Latin, which means root, the root of freedom. So, what is the root of freedom? Our freedom is founded in choice, which is part of it, but also in knowledge and understanding, right, and ability. And so, it's not a narrow thing. And so, my purpose is really to get people out of the system that's impoverishing them, enslaving them, and trying to bring them over and helping them to understand there are different ways to do things. I work with insurance and the infinite banking concept, and it's been around since the late 1700s. And it's been, I think, the Presbyterian Church, I think, use it for their missionaries and for the works they were doing to grow that out. And it was used for many, many years. You've had people like Ray Kroc of McDonald's. You had Disney. The banks wouldn't back him, so he started his own company that way. You had J.C. Penney helped him get through the Great Depression. You have people still use it. In fact, today a lot of real estate people use it for both hard money lending and for investing. So it's a great way to use cash differently. The one thing that's nice about insurance is that it protects you a bit against taxes in most places, in all places. It protects you against collections in most places in the United States. And it just gives you the freedom of having that cash value available to you. So people think of life insurance and they think about, well, I'm not going to die anytime soon. Well, maybe, maybe not. Nobody knows that. But the other part of that, people don't look at the life benefits that are included in this asset, in this vehicle that they can use for themselves. And I'm also a big advocate of gold and silver and the maintenance of, or the way it preserves your wealth. And so what I'm trying to get people to do is understand. I've only just understood this the last 3 years or so. I found this at the end of 2020, very end of 2020, and just trying to figure it out and find people who actually give you good information about it, because you have very conflicting ideas about what it is and what it can do for you.
Mhm.
But it's better than the banks, because as you know, in 2010, they passed the Dodd-Frank Act. And within that is the OLA, the Orderly Liquidation Authority, I believe it was something like that was called. I can't remember the exact term. In any case, now what banks can do, they consider you a shareholder, and so they can bail in your cash. So if they get in trouble, they can just take your cash and you're out. And it's already starting to happen, and people haven't realized that. It's not widely known, but they need to understand that they're a very big risk of just having their cash taken completely and totally by these crooks. And so again, it goes back to controlling your own means and ways of production. And the more we can do that for everybody, the more we can do that for ourselves, the better off we'll do. But we also have to cooperate with each other. We have to help each other, because if you sit there in our own silos, in our own foxholes, and just do our own thing, we're not going to make an impact.
Hmm. Well said. Well said. And thank you for sharing those facts there. Now, when you mentioned, things were going crazy, the first thing comes to my mind is that 2008 period, where there was massive bailouts, government interventions to quote unquote stabilize the economy, right?
Yeah.
And then a lot of critics can argue that such interventions actually might have hindered the natural correction process, and or, I mean, if whatever you were doing led you to take trillions of dollars to the grave and many millions of people with it. I mean, are those the people that we want to give back? Like round two, you know what I'm saying, to begin
Right.
with, to
Right.
do it again. Then we got on top of that, we got the hyper, inflation and economic policies, right? So we got concerns about inflation. We know that it's really not what they describe. It's a deflation
Mm-hmm.
of the currency.
Mm-hmm.
That they want to describe as inflation to protect the, um, human, I mean, the public interest of what maybe really the definition would showcase, that they're devaluing the currency systematically instead of the cost of goods actually rising, which
Yes.
is an element of control, right? Because high
Yes.
inflation rates actually can erode purchasing power and
Right.
potentially impact cost of living. And so now many people can't start the business they want, for example, because they're too worried about going and making sure the lights are on. So they go and wind up, the next Picasso winds up working for, Exxon. They may have a great, what we deem as a great lifestyle based on a nice income. Maybe they're making, whatever dollars per year, but they never really get that satisfaction of that creativity of being human,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff like that, that pleasure, and who knows what they could have been for their family, and or just that part. So with financial crises and the economic inflation situations, it kind of starting to, maybe we need to look back at the urban renewal and displacement of the 50s and through 70s, when the government interventions displaced what they call low income communities in the name of development, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
critics would argue that these initiatives disrupted existing sustainable communities. So now we're fighting to be sustainable. As we become sustainable, we have to risk the fact that the magic wand could go, oh, financial crisis and inflation, boom, now we eradicate everything you just built. So that
Yeah.
really comes back full circle to the question of what um, services you offer that could actually start to help the community change their thought from transactional leadership of the past to a transformative leadership situation, so that we can now prepare to be ahead of the game and ready for the next wave of financial crisis and maybe even potentially hyperinflation on the horizon?
Yeah, the one of the things I help in the financial realm, in the monetary realm, I would say, or in the currency realm, but I've also connected with people from the hemp industry, from the agricultural, from permaculture, and so I'm really trying to make it that's dealing with all those different things, right? You have to deal with food, water, shelter, clothing. Those are the most important things, and then people need to remember that first of all, acknowledge it, second of all, and then move forward with it and do something about it, third of all, and it's just waking people up, and it's a very slow process. Most people don't want to be awake, they don't want to deal with it, but if we can get 3% of the people, if we get 3% of the people, that starts that momentum going, right? If we get 10%, that's saturation. That's a good number of people who know what's going on, and then it just can take it from there. But it's just waking up that first 3%, and I think probably less than 1% are actually awake and knowing what's going on or willing to do anything about it, and we have to hit that 3% mark, I think.
Okay. And then, yeah, because we got to create our own situation, because as we know, the global financial institutions can weaponize, through prioritization of certain industries and or people, individuals, whatever, over others, and basically create disadvantages that otherwise wouldn't be there for specific regions, sectors, or a group of people, making inequitable sustainable development, right?
Yes, yes, yes,
Or
absolutely.
inequality, excuse me, in sustainable development.
Yeah, we have to, it has to start. We have to, again, people just need to realize that what's important. They think in what's important now are sports, or they think that it's their television, or whatever it is, right? Whatever is coming up, what some of this event, that event. And don't get me wrong, I think people should be able to enjoy life. I enjoy social dancing with my wife. It's great. We have,
Mm.
when we can, we go. But and our other activities I like. But at the same time, we have to take care of our families. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care of our community. And I don't think people are really looking at community. I was talking to somebody one day, and I was like, I'm just looking for a good community. He's like, oh, there's this great place over here, this one area. I'm like, that's not a community. That's an area. People don't even understand what community is anymore. They don't understand what
Right.
cooperation is anymore. I'm dealt with HOA.com, Thomas Evans, I met not too long ago, and he's really trying to help people create professionals who support families, households, home owners. And I took that a little bit further, and now I'm trying to, like you said, touch on all the bases, right? Food, water, shelter, clothing, energy, cash. How can we get everybody starting to see that this is a cooperative thing that everyone needs to do to succeed? Um, so I don't know where I was necessarily going with that, but it needs to be a bigger picture. People need to see from the 1,000-foot view or 10,000-foot view, or however how you want to go, and look down and see what's going on, and start to move with a larger plan instead of these individual efforts that I see.
So, with that on the table, for the activists out there that are going to lobby, potentially lobby, support, rally the community, how can the government actions better support communities in achieving traditional wealth on our terms?
How can the government do it?
How
Stop
can
doing it.
government actions?
Stop doing it. Stop doing what they're doing. Stop
Just go
passing
away.
stupid laws, right? Stop passing stupid laws. Stop interfering. Stop lording over the people. Stop, and look at ways to help. The best thing they can do is just stay out of the way,
Okay.
um, and that's the best thing the government can do. Because the only way government can do anything is if they take money from other people, cash from other people, currency from other people, and redistribute it. Well, that's not working. It's never worked. It's never going to work. People locally, if they're going to support, the best thing they could do is maybe advertise. But again, you're still taking cash from people. The best thing they can do is get out of the way. Don't leave people alone is the best thing the government can do at this point, because
Okay.
they've already made a complete mess of everything.
So with that on the table, you bring up, I think you, I think you latently bring up the most paramount reason why this conversation needs to be taken national, on a grassroots level, because once people understand what's actually happening and what's potentially going to happen, or what the world's leading to, or what's been done in the past, if we don't take responsibility, then they can value doing something different. They can value the transformation that's going to be required of our communities, our mentalities, our mindsets, our teachers, our leaders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because they got this thing called socially responsible investments. And when you talk
Hmm.
about the government taking cash and even corporations and entities on a higher, larger scale, what if their taking cash is working, but it's working an agenda that we weren't privy voting for and happens to be against us?
Right.
Because if we're playing football, one team wants to win, the other team got to lose, right? So on a positive approach, government would say that their SRI program is attracting investment in business and strong environments and social practices, yada yada. That's how they're going to sell it to the public, like any
Yes.
great politician. However, we are basically covered how it could be manipulating to favor certain industries, exclude other people perceived as less compliant, which we get into social credit score now. Okay, sustainability with goods, potentially affecting livelihoods, workers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what we've identified is socially responsible investments. I think that needs to be our new community buzzword. If we don't invest in our own social,
Right.
redefine community as to what we want it to be, there are entities, corporations, large and larger, not even that are going to invest in it for us, and it won't be maybe what we want it to be. So that comes into where you and your talent and your intangibles are really going to be a great asset to the community, and being able to leverage a non-traditional means of protection for future generations.
Yeah, as you're saying what you're saying, actually, you took me back, and remembering what you said earlier and some of the things I said, I'd like to actually revisit your question about what the government can do. So originally, the government is supposed to protect our rights. That's what they should be doing, and that's all they should be doing. They shouldn't be getting involved in commerce. That's the job of the people. Industry is the job of the people, right? And it's supposed to be we the people, not we the government. And that's what another thing that people need to realize. Another thing you alluded to is all the laws are built around commerce, and they have been for a very long time, right? It's all about making the extra dollar. And a lot of people don't like this, but the police, where were they found? When were they founded? They weren't founded there. You don't find them in the Constitution. Tell me where they're in the Constitution, right? In the South, they were meant to control the slaves. They were meant to chase them down and bring them back. They were meant to, you know, quit rebellions, stop rebellions. In the North, they
Mhm.
were meant to keep the peace so that commerce could be done. So you're exactly right, and people don't realize that. So the police have never been for the people. They protect and serve the government and the corporations. The people are a secondary thing, and people need to understand that, and police need to understand that. They need to understand that if we want to, police are a sign of a slave state. They're a sign of a controlled state. We should have what is in the Constitution is our militia, trained militia. If we want to protect our communities, then we need to bring back the militia. And the government's changed that. They've changed them into the National Guard, right? And they say, well, you're only supposed to use here, and we control you, and we tell you what to do and how to do it, even if it's firing on your own people. And so the militia needs, I think, to come back, and people need to have that to protect their own areas, their own people, right? And I think that will bring back community, a sense of community, because then we're all in this together. We're all trying to survive and thrive and prosper together, and we can only do it together.
I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a great financial aspect that we have to overcome. And
Yes.
what we need to do is diversify our portfolio, right? Because with trade and economic sanctions, like when you talk about hemp, if the government is saying that there's a embargo on the use of hemp in construction, then we need to come and invest in innovation and R&D to certify and justify the use of hemp in the community so that we can do our own thing. Or we need to figure out
Yes.
how to get out from under that jurisdiction so that when we build in our locations, we control the regulatory aspect, right? How is that possible? You have to have your way on your own certain private lands and stuff like that. You can do kind of more what you want. So how do we reach that? Like there's R&D factor there. And there's of course the access to financial resources because if they limit that, then they control everything. So we got to pull together um, What do you see as one of the most valuable things to leave the community to think about on our way
Well,
to
besides what I already said, I think people have lost track and they don't understand that there are what are called private membership associations that you can form that keep that keep everything that we do private instead of in the public. So what they've done with their laws is they brought everything into the public domain, and so that means anything goes. They can decide how to deal with people. If you bring it back into the public domain and make yourself a private membership association, and then the other part of that is to go back to allodial title or land grants where the property actually belongs to us. The government shouldn't own property. It was never intended to own property. People are supposed to own property. And so we need to go back to that again. And so we actually own the property. The original Constitution, I believe, was meant to be life, liberty, and property, and they changed it to the pursuit of happiness. This is what my understanding. I'm not sure if that's correct. I haven't seen the source for that, but that's what I keep seeing, and it makes sense because property is one of the things that help bring wealth, right? If you control
Mhm.
property, if you control currency, if you control all these things, right, the means, the ways of production, which is property, then you control your destiny more. You control the potential of a better destiny. And so bringing back that idea of private land ownership instead of real estate. Real estate comes from real, which is royal. So royal, it belongs to this royalty. It belongs to the state. It belongs to right those who control it. Private property is a different thing, and that's what we're supposed to have. So bringing back private property, bringing back private membership associations, getting rid of the income tax altogether and the IRS and all these crooks that are out there just stealing from people. So those are some of the ways that need to change.
Hey, I appreciate the conversation today. You bring up a lot of great points. I think you're a great asset for the community, and people should reach out to you because it's not a question of can you help them, it's a matter of how you can help them. So no matter what their destination is, you know, large household, small community alike, get together. Let's start having these conversations to see what can be done. Because, like you said, one of the biggest factors that's stopping us is some well-known book said, our people perish due to lack of knowledge,
Yes.
not lack of resources. So we got to get out of the we don't have the resources mind and just accept that we just not doing the right things with them collectively. All
Right.
right. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Closing remarks.
No, just find somebody. If it's not me, find somebody you can work with. It's who you know, like, and trust is the biggest thing, and find people that you can find out about infinite banking and how it works. There's the Nelson Nash Institute. You can always visit my site, traditionalwealth.net, and I have tons of links for people to go and peruse and learn more about what's going on and how it's going. It was not in a great position right now, so ignore the lack of aesthetics and just look for the information. That's another thing that people need to start doing too, is they need to look past the facade. They have to look past the superficial, and they really need to start delving in and finding the depths and where the truth. That's where the truth is. It's not. You can't read a book by a cover, right? Is the saying, and they really need to start reading in and reading the books and find out what's in there.
That's another amazing quirk to present because when they're controlling the access to the funding, it's easy for the certain agendas to get the fancy shiny, flashy gold, sparkle, and the ones that are doing it from the grassroots, from the bootstrap, so to speak, it's going to be a little rough around the edges in the beginning until the community puts in the support. And one of the problems we have in our community is that they don't invest in each other until they're already flashy shiny, which normally
Mm-hmm.
by then got the investment from, in many cases, the wrong
Yep.
people. And
Yep.
now they're then they're even, like some would say Martin Luther King, for example. The community didn't really support him, Michael Luther King. And then he got funding from other agencies, let's say, right? Other communities. Well, now there's an agenda tied to that benefits them. So what if his assassination was because, when you trace it all the way back, simply because his community didn't support him in the beginning, didn't put the money behind him,
Mm-hmm.
another community did, and then now when they tried to pull in their agenda pushing, it caused him to be compromised, which led to ultimately him getting assassinated, right? So if we start looking at opportunities like that on that scale, there's so many reasons why the community needs to invest in each other, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
right?
Well, and that's the other part. And so you remind me of another part of that. So not just uh, finding the information, but learn how to grow food. And there are several local places here that show us how to grow food naturally, right, with permaculture. Get away from all the toxic chemicals and all the other things that they're doing. And like you said, support the local. There are local businesses. Go out and find them. Find out who needs help growing and helping other people to grow. And that's a fantastic way to do it. You're absolutely right. Stay away from the big funding because they have their own agenda, and it's cash is their bottom line. They don't care about the people necessarily. They just want their return on investment. If you want a real return on investment, invest on your people, invest in your neighborhoods, invest in your family, invest in yourself.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. And in the future, in the future, because it's not.
Absolutely.
If we don't do something about it today, what are we leaving behind? What world are we going to leave behind? Doesn't matter if we leave them a home that the government, the quote unquote government's going to figure out a gentrification program to strip from the family. If we don't have a world sustained where it's going to prevent that from being an option for the quote unquote government to do to the people to begin with, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Anything that we didn't cover um, during this period that you would like to speak on?
I don't think so, man. You covered quite a bit. You're good at this. I would say no. Just people need to think. They need to engage. They need to stop living in their own silos and start coming out and getting together and doing something effective. So no, you're absolutely correct.
Hey, man, team sport, man. I couldn't have done it without you today, and we couldn't do it without the people that will see this in the future. So now and
Amen.
in the future. So take this. How would you like for the people to reach out to you? The email is flashing below. What other ways can they find you? And I'll put all of the details in the description below.
The easiest way to find me is traditionalwealth.net. It has links to all the companies I'm involved with, all the people I've looked at and who I really like and I support, and any of the factors that I've already been talking about. And even technology is another portion that people need to look at and reevaluate. And I also have that on my site.
Awesome. Awesome. I appreciate your time today, Ian. Say bye to the people.
Thank you, Pasha. You're awesome. Thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone, for watching today.
Pasha Paro, thank you for tuning. Enjoy.